Well, I am running for U.S. Congress in the House of Representatives. I will not have the authority or the power to dictate decisions, but I will have the obligation and the duty to introduce legislation that could impact or affect or make decisions. And as a U.S. congressman, one of the first things that I would do is to push for legislation to stop providing munitions and support to Israel, not only in their overall military, but also specifically for operations in Lebanon and in Gaza and the funding of equipment and operations in the West Bank. I would push for legislation to cut all of that. I would introduce legislation to begin the normalization of relations with Iran and Russia and China. As the world changes into a multipolar world, the United States cannot consider itself the supreme or the hegemon and further isolate itself as a pariah state on the world stage. And the truth is, the United States must normalize relations with Iran and with Russia and with China. So that would be legislation that I would also push for. And I would also push for legislation for the United States to reestablish and normalize relations with the United Nations and to push for military action against Israel if they do not leave the occupied territories of Gaza and Lebanon and the West Bank. I consider Hamas and I consider Hezbollah to be resistance forces, defense forces, if you will, of the Palestinian people and of Lebanon. If Israel has an Israeli defense force, then why too cannot Lebanon have a defense force? Why cannot Palestine have a defense force as they should? I believe that Palestinians are fighting resistance for their survival and for their existence. And Hezbollah is fighting in Lebanon for the sovereignty of Lebanon, for the establishment and the enforcement of international law. Israel should leave the occupied territories of Palestine and should leave southern Lebanon, should completely withdraw. Israel continues the narrative that they are conducting military operations in Hezbollah because of the continued attacks from Hezbollah into Israel. And the truth is that Hezbollah is defending itself from Israel. Israel should not be occupying territories within Lebanon, and Israel should not be conducting continued military operations and continuing the genocide and the killing of Palestinians. If I were born in Gaza and I were a Palestinian and living under the boot of Israel, I would join Hamas if I was a Palestinian. I would fight for my people and resist occupation. If I was in Lebanon, I would fight for my country. I would fight with the Lebanese army, but it's clear that the Lebanese army and the Lebanese government is really doing nothing to dispel occupational forces from the south of Lebanon. So if I lived in southern Lebanon and I was a Lebanese citizen, I would join Hezbollah and take up arms against the occupier. Regardless of the United States and Israel identifying Hezbollah and Hamas as quote unquote terrorist groups, they are resistance fronts fighting for their sovereignty and defending their people. Just as much as the IDF claim to be defending Israelis, Hezbollah and Hamas are defending Palestinians and Lebanese. Well, to those that are already serving and those that are already in uniform, whether they're officers or non-commissioned officers or enlisted, take a hard look at what you're a part of. Take a hard look at who's directing the United States military and what the United States military is being directed to do. And what I would remind every member of the military, but especially officers, is that the military is led by officers. Non-commissioned officers and soldiers cannot give orders. Officers give orders. The military is run by officers. And when officers give orders, they have one responsibility and one commitment, and that is to the Constitution. And as a military officer, when you take your oath to service, specifically the oath that you take is that you, the appointed officer, swear to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign or domestic, and that you take the obligation freely without reservation, so help you God. And nowhere in that oath does it say that you swear allegiance to a president, that you swear allegiance to a political party. You do not even swear allegiance to the United States Army. You swear allegiance to uphold and defend the Constitution, period. And military officers need to remember that when orders given from higher violate international law and violate the Geneva Convention and violate the spirit and the letter of our Constitution, that those orders should not be obeyed. And in fact, there is an obligation to disobey those orders. And if all officers were to follow that, then non-commissioned officers and soldiers wouldn't be put in a position to where they're violating the Constitution, because the officers that are ordering them what to do should be following the oath of the Constitution. So I would remind all military under this leadership, I would say do not. We have many American veterans in the United States who are homeless or who live in shelters or on the streets, who don't know where their next meal is coming from. We still have a veteran suicide rate of 22 veterans who take their lives every day here in the United States, and that trend is increasing. Our veterans need to be taken care of. I myself, to include the veterans of my generation, spent 25 years, 20 years, 30 years, however long they served in the entirety of service at war, in war, fighting war. And that takes a toll on an army, and that takes a toll on the population. And veterans need to be cared for and provided with medical, financial, economic assistance. And right now, the federal government is not doing a good job. They need to do better. And I will advocate for that deeply. Well, in the situation with Edward Snowden or with Julian Assange, the information that they shared, though I consider it brave and necessary, and what they did, they shared information that was absolutely classified and was information that they had access to based on the premise of their employment and jobs. I don't disapprove of what they did. I think it was necessary, but that's the legality of it. In my case, like with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, I was a contractor for a private firm. I was not working for the government. I was not in the military at the time. I am retired from the military. I am a permanently 100% disabled retired member of the military. I can never be called back onto active duty. And because I can never be called back onto active duty, I can never be courts-martialed unless there is something that I did while I was on active duty. So in this case, I have not revealed any classified secrets. Everything that I discuss is very much in the open public. I just put context to it so that most Americans can understand it. But everything that I've shared of what's in Section 224 of the NDAA, not only is that public information, the U.S. Congress has a legal obligation to provide that and share that to the public. Most Americans don't necessarily understand the nuances of that. And nor would they. Most Americans don't live their lives understanding the intricacies of legislation. But nothing that I've discussed, from Gaza to the war in Iran to the U.S.-Israeli relationship, 25 years of experience as a special operations officer and being involved in the government, that I put context to it that people can understand. To that point, there are certainly risks regardless. In everything that I have spoken out, yes, though not illegal or unethical or immoral or against any laws, I have still received threats from the Infidels Motorcycle Club, from the GHF, from individuals online. So yeah, there is a lot of risks to it. In my case, the risks are personal and against my reputation and my my persona, I guess. I would not say it's against my character, because character is what one believes in themselves. Reputation is what others may believe. So does that impact my reputation? Sure. But reputation is not necessarily that important to me, not more so than one's character. And when the United States government makes a decision that violates law, it is a clear violation of the Fourth Protocol of the Geneva Convention. It is a clear violation of humanitarian law and the laws of armed conflict. Without question, no justification. It is clearly a violation of all such things. But to anyone in the military that may want to speak out against that, to say that's wrong, they would be quickly punished and or kicked out, because the United States government has said, well, it's okay. So where it really becomes difficult is where the United States government rewrites the rules when the implication of such is clearly a violation of standards, international norms, international laws, and Geneva Convention. That's when it becomes very difficult, because I care about representing Americans, not special interest groups. So continue to spread the word. Continue to spread the word, even though you may not live in North Carolina or North Carolina District 13 and are able to vote for me, you can always support my campaign, or you can simply continue to get the word out there for candidates like myself. That, you see that AIPAC green doesn't mean Green Party. That AIPAC green means that I have their approval or their endorsement as a candidate that doesn't take money from any political action committees, to include AIPAC. I'm a complete independent. And then get the word out in comparison to, candidates like my opponent, the incumbent Brad Knott, takes millions of dollars from AIPAC and doesn't even live in the district that he represents. Americans need to know that. A lot of Americans, even in this district, don't even know that their representative at Congress doesn't even live in our district. Donald Trump is by name the president of the United States, but in action, behavior, and in his duty, he serves Israel first, he serves himself second, and he does not serve the American people. The Israeli forces and U.S. forces under U.S. Central Command are completely integrated and synchronized in operations that are currently ongoing against Iran. At the Ben Gvir airport in Israel, there are numerous U.S. military officers who coordinate logistics, targeting, intelligence. The U.S. military currently has numerous KC-130 tankers, C-47 tankers, C-17s, and C-130 supply aircraft. All of these at Ben Gurion Airport, which are coordinated between the United States military and the Israeli military. They're in the sharing of intelligence is seamless. It is being shared between both, and also in targeting, in target identification, in targeting solutions in terms of what targets to hit and when. But also the U.S. Central Command Forward Headquarters is currently occupying Site 66 in Israel. So though there is a small amount of Americans that are still in Qatar at Al Udeid Air Base, much of U.S. Central Command headquarters is now operating out of Israel. And U.S. Central Command, for many years, has maintained a very close relationship with Israeli forces, to where year by year by year, Israeli forces integrate themselves more and more into U.S. operations, to a point where in some cases, Israeli forces are telling American forces what to do. Well, I do not let the United States military chain of command off the hook by saying it was Israel that was responsible. Did Israel provide targeting information that the Manaab school was a viable target based on intelligence or military application, in terms of that the Iranian IRGC that it was a military base? I do think that Israel provided intelligence to the United States that was knowingly inaccurate and knowingly incorrect. The western coast of Iran is the most observed and surveilled, ubiquitously watched area of land in the world. And for Israel or the United States to say that they didn't know that it was no longer an auxiliary base, which it hadn't been an auxiliary base for over a decade. It was a girls' school. So did Israel provide intelligence for a target that they knew was not what it was? Yes. But that blame does not reside. They have culpability in this. But that blame does not reside on Israel. The blame rides on the shoulders of Admiral Brad Cooper and the commander that authorized the Tomahawk strike from that missile destroyer that fired that Tomahawk not once but twice, 2 Tomahawks that hit that school. Because even if the intelligence that was provided was given and it was believed and it was accurate and it was current, a Tomahawk cruise missile, what's called a TLAM, a Tomahawk Land Assault Missile or a cruise missile, when it is fired, that missile has a terminal controller, an officer, a weapons system officer that sits at that panel or sits at that console and observes the flight of that missile. They don't just fire it and say, "Okay, wait for it to hit." It is observed from the missile the entire way. It has a full motion screen video in front. It is at the same time a missile. It is also a surveillable munition. The Tomahawk cruise missile can loiter over its target for up to 24 hours before it strikes, and it can watch it. I have been on the end of using Tomahawks before and have watched this. I know exactly how it works. Even up until the last moment, that mission could have been terminated and that missile could have been directed off of that target. And the entire time knowing, whether it wasn't known before launch, but even after launch, you can see that that objective was not a military base. It was a girls' school. There were children going in and out. There was playground equipment. The walls were painted with flowers and butterflies. There was no military equipment. There were children. That strike and the responsibility of that strike and the war crime of that strike and the blood on the stain in the fabric of humanity and ethics is squarely on the shoulders of the United States military, on Pete Hegseth, on Admiral Brad Cooper, and the officer that authorized that strike. Section 224, when it passes, how that unfolds in reality is that the United States Department of Defense has inroads and touches every organization from the Department of Homeland Security to the Department of Drug Enforcement to the Border Patrol to ICE to the CIA to the State Department. To infiltrate the military provides inroads and infiltration into every aspect of the United States government. And the specific language of Section 224 of the proposed NDAA provides access and sharing, and in some cases ownership, to the Israeli military and to Israel in everything from our software development to our AI development to the implementation of AI and machine learning into not only the military industrial complex, but in technology and surveillance and systems used in the United States, such as tracking your cell phone or et cetera. So with that technology and that capability, it's bad enough that our own government would be doing it against its citizens. But to then incorporate the Israeli government into that to where it's basically just open access. The way I would compare this anecdotally, or excuse me, as an analogy, would be imagine if your neighbor, who you might trust, you've known for many years, you would trust your neighbor to check on your dog while you were on vacation, but would you invite your neighbor into your home and give them your Wi-Fi password and then give them the routing number and bank account and login information to all of your bank accounts, and then give them the code to your safe, and then give them your social security number and the key to your safety deposit box?